Now, we love to shed hunt, and like I've said before, we really enjoy finding them on client properties and on our own properties. But there's a good time to go and a bad time. And we'll just dive right into it. We have something we call the 80% rule. And what I mean by that is when you're shed hunting on private land, your own private land that you can lease, the only private land you can shed hunt on. And you have to be very mindful when you go, considering that if no one else has permission to shed hunt that land and it's not a competition, then meaning you're the only one that goes out and you have bucks that are holding on that land. If you go too early, you're going to push those bucks off. And what I find this time of year is unless you have a giant bait pile, then you're the only one in the area, or some food source where every deer in the entire county is coming to, then they just go somewhere else. And sometimes that could be a mile and a half away, and they stay. So they're not coming back very soon. It could be a month before they come back, if they come back at all, because sometimes when deer leave and go to their winter grounds, they don't come back until the following fall, to that fall grounds and fall hunting grounds that you're hunting. We have a lot of our bucks, the majority of bucks around here in Minnesota and Wisconsin, that we do not see during the summertime, the springtime, and sometime late winter. And a lot of times late winter, meaning when you get a lot of snow and you get a lot of cold, those deer just start to leave and they go somewhere else. So they're gone and they're not coming back. You can push them off prematurely. So you really have to watch. And it's kind of an antler watch that we have going on right now. It's February 10th when we're shooting this video. And I can honestly say February 1st, we had 3 bucks. We had 2 wounded ones, one that we knew about that the neighbor's been sharing us. We're hoping is LL Beams, a buck that I wounded back during bow season, a buck that dropped his antlers December 14th. He's got a wound on that side. We hope it's him. But just like us, no one's out there looking for antlers right now. They're waiting. And there's a reason for that. But we had that buck. We had another one that was wounded, limping. And then we had about a 2-year-old 8-point that dropped. And that was up till February 1st. Since February 1st, we've noticed another 6, 7, 8 deer that have either had half racks or no racks. And so they're really starting to exponentially drop now on February 10th. But that being said, before we had 5%, down, 10% at the most. Now we're in that 25, 30% range. 30% of all antlers that have dropped, that could drop. So not a lot. And so that means if we're out running around in some of our core areas where deer are bedding or feeding, especially those daylight areas we're going to be looking for antlers, then we can bump those deer off and we lose them to somewhere else. So what I like to see, that number getting closer to 80%. Could be 70%, 65, 85. It's very subjective. But I want to see a super majority of the antlers dropped before I go out and look. And there is a squirrel effect. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But bottom line is I want to wait a little bit. And that number is going to be consistently every single year. Traditional timing doesn't change from year to year. People will see a couple wounded buck antler drops. So they'll even find a couple wounded bucks or run down bucks. And they'll say, oh, they're dropping early. No, it's just that particular buck. If you look at the overall entire pool, which is what cameras will tell you. I had someone the other day say they're banning cameras on their property. They're not using cameras ever again. Well, that person's going to be less of a hunter for it. They're not going to learn deer behavior, buck behavior as much, and they won't even know what bucks are on the property, because if you rely on visible sightings of deer during hunting season, you're going to see about half of your bucks, and that's going to be a very small percentage of your actual oldest bucks. Most of the oldest bucks we see in the field, we're getting a shot at. It's that 1 or 2 times you see them through the year, you get a shot or not, and that's it. Some of the younger bucks we're seeing often, and we know where we can go watch them. And that changes as they become older. So with a camera, you get to see 95% of your bucks plus, if you know your bucks in the area and you have a good camera program that are in the area. So it sets expectations, sets goals. And with cameras, you can also see how your intrusions on the property go. We can tell right now, if we go into an area, we go do some work, we cut a bedding area, we drive down on a certain trail to clear trails, clear a log off a trail, put a blind out, do something with a stand, we can see for the next 2 weeks, we're not getting the same deer usage in that area with multiple cameras looking. I mean, it's pretty black and white that you can see what's going on. So with those cameras, you can really see exactly, meaning within 5-10%, how many antlers have dropped. So when you see that, awesome. If you're not using cameras, just go by traditional. Don't get sucked into antlers are dropping early, so you got to get out. That's a huge difference on public land. Public land is competitive. I know guys shed hunting. James, one of my clients, he's been out and he's been shed hunting for probably a month and finding antlers. And he does it. He walks everywhere. He walks all kinds of public land, private land. He has permission everywhere. So for him, he's getting out there before other people. A lot of the properties, he does have a big parcel that he can shed hunt personally himself on his own, and no one's ever going to have pressure. But he has a lot of properties that other people are shed hunting too. So for him, it's more of a competition. Let's get him the day after they drop. Basically, I'm sure would be his view, and he loves it. It's his workout time. He walks miles and miles and miles all the time. So that's the thought on public land. Get out there early and often. Even look at the same spot you did 2 days ago, because you never know where they're going to drop. And because there's so many people looking in those areas, because it's so competitive, then those deer are getting bumped around. So you're getting bumped around all over the place. You never know where they're going to drop. They could have gotten bumped out of one area, gone someplace, and a day later they're back in the area they got bumped out of originally because they got bumped out of 2 other spots in the last 24 hours. So always public land, completely different story. Ignore the 80% rule. That's bottom line. Timing varies greatly by region. It doesn't vary greatly by habitat type within that region, but it could vary greatly by region to region. Dylan and I were just talking about a parcel he's been looking at that is more on the kind of the area where ag land meets big woods. You know, kind of the edge of wolf country, if you look at it that way in Wisconsin. And that parcel's in that area where you could start getting into some big woods. There's some ag around that area, so I imagine there's moderate deer numbers. I imagine there's overall good herd health. But it's not too much further than that. You get into almost all woods, and you get into a lot of county land. It's a lot of northern area. You get into more snow. And I would say that you could go probably within a 10-mile area there, and you could have antlers dropping consistently sometime in January to early February. And then you get down in that ag land area 10 miles to the south, or the direction the ag is in, and you're going to find antlers dropping more of a February, mid-February, late February, like around here, because they have more food, less winter stress, because they have a lot more food. And you can even look at antlers drop, and yeah, testosterone levels decrease, all that kind of garbage, but you just look at the outside tangibles that you can actually see. You can't measure testosterone dropping. You can measure what the weather's like, what the habitat conditions are like, and traditional antler dropping that you see personally. You can measure that. I always bring this up. The Cousineau Research Facility in Shingleton, Michigan, they average about 225 inches of snow there. It's one of the big snow belt areas. Not quite the north side of the county. Elger County is that county right there. They average more like 295 up near Melstrand. It's about, let's say, 25 miles from Shingleton area, 30 miles. But that Shingleton area, they studied deer for almost 30 years. John Azoga, Lou Verm, and a bunch of other guys, Fredericks. There's a lot of people that studied deer there for a long time. Azoga wrote over 100 peer-reviewed articles on deer. A lot of that research based out of that location. A lot of those guys did it for almost their entire career. They had a 1-mile enclosure. Those deer were the same deer that were on the outside, meaning there was no genetic manipulation. There were no new deer brought in from other areas. They did artificially raise or reduce numbers within there, but those deer were pellet fed. And so the deer on the outside would lose their antlers by mid-January at the latest, most of them, where the deer that were pellet fed on the inside, just across the fence, same weather, same browsed out habitat, maybe even worse habitat, but because they were pellet fed, they held their antlers closer to March and sometimes in March. So almost a 2-month difference just based on a fence, one side of the fence to the other, just because they were pellet fed. So that food source and the food can make such a big difference. And yeah, you could say that if they have an abundant amount of food, great cover, their testosterone levels will stay higher longer. There'll be later breeding going on if there's more does. But really just look at those outside tangibles of bad weather, bad habitat. They're going to lose them a lot earlier. So you can see within the same region, if the habitat varies greatly, you might see a difference 10 miles apart, 5 miles apart. But typically within that region, if you know your area, when they drop, like from here to Wisconsin where we hunt 50 miles away or 50 minutes away, we see about the same timing. There's really no difference. We're seeing bucks with antlers over there, here, and like I said, maybe 30% have dropped, 25%, but it's not at 50 or 60. That's a fact because we have enough cameras to tell us otherwise. The squirrel effect. This is the problem when you have late antler dropping. Like I said, we'll see antlers still holding early April consistently every single year. We'll see one or two. It's an outlier. But at the same time, it's not uncommon. But it is very common to see antlers in early March. So here's the thing. We have bucks that wounded buck drops December 14th. We have healthy bucks dropping early March, early February, late January. It really, when you have later shed drop timings, the timing of how many antlers drop over a long period of time is significantly greater. What that means for you, I'm looking at like if the antlers on that December 14th buck that we might think is LL beams were on our property, you can bet I would have gone over that with a grid pattern every foot within a 50-acre area if I thought that's where he was at. He is not. He's about a half mile around the corner on someone else's where I do not have permission to go shed hunt. Or I would have been out there already a lot. Because by the time someone actually is shed hunting and finds them in March around here, then there's a good chance half of those will be gone or more due to squirrels. And that'll be a big shame if that's the case. So if you can get into lightly touching areas, and we'll do that around here. We found a lot by side, just going on the edge of the woods, into our little hunting plots where we're not getting too invasive into the property, looking from the side by side, taking short little walks from one little hunting plot to the other, around water holes, areas where we can get into and lightly touch without getting into the interior of our property where we're spooking deer. And that's what I'd recommend you do. Go to these out of area locations where you can, but if you get into the heart of your property, that's where you start getting into that 80% rule a little bit more. There are areas you can chip away at, get in and out. And of course, if you're on public land, you don't have to worry about that. Of course, if you're in an area where they're dropping all in January, you don't have to worry about that either. Get it out in early February. You have a high percentage dropping in a short period of time, then go right after. And of course, number 5, go when you can. You know, a lot of people don't have time off. They get this weekend, they get that weekend. I know when we have weekends, we're gone this week for a little bit, and then we come back. And we're back Saturday. We have a baby shower to go to. Sunday, Jackson's first birthday party that he got invited to at school. One of his little school friends. He'll be 3 this year, end of March. So crazy. They're starting to get into that where they get invited to birthday parties, and it's kind of cool. We can't wait to go to that. But bottom line is, not as much time in and around when you start looking at these things every weekend that you have to go to, especially with a young family, old family, whatever you have. You just run into where you don't have a lot of time. So just go when you can. And that's kind of like, you know, I hunt by the weather. I can hunt any day I want. I can't hunt every day I want. And what I mean by that is I have to pick and choose. I still have to do a lot of work, whether it's clients, videos, whatever we do, there's other stuff to do during hunting season. I can look at a day 7-10 days in advance, say I'm going hunting then because the weather is going to be great. A lot of people can't do that. You have this weekend, that weekend, this week off to go shed hunting. That's when you go. Just enjoy it. Forget about all the shed timing stuff, the 80% rule. Just go and have a good time, just like hunting. Go and have a good time. The bottom line is you want to be scientific about it. Then really pay attention to some of these points, especially pushing those bucks off to other people's property you don't have permission to shed hunt on, if you don't have to be out in the woods. But like I said, even with us, if we want to go work in an area, I'm going to sacrifice finding antlers for a particular buck, even if he's one of our older ones, to not getting work done. I'd rather get that work done and get in there, enjoy our woods, go for rides, things like that. And I will say that we go on a lot of rides after dark during the wintertime. We have the tracks, lights, heat. We go for a family cruise, go with friends. We can do that around on our property. And I'd rather go at night. It seems like by machine at night, you spook a lot fewer deer. And that's the case for the hunting season. That's why we go and track deer after dark too. So hope you can get out, find some antlers this year. We had another video on some fast shed hunting tips, how you can get out and speed shed hunt. And hopefully these timing videos on where to hunt really help you out and for helping you find some antlers this year. And bottom line is, you know, yeah, I'd like to see you find some antlers, but who cares? Just getting out there, going for a walk this time of year really helps fight the winter blues and help you, most of all, scout, which is one of our priorities for getting out there this time of year. And I hope you can get out in the woods very soon.
Everyone, thanks for watching to the end of the video. I really want you to check out whitetailhabitatsolutions.com, Pure Wildlife Blends. There's so much we have to offer you. You know, if you never buy anything from us or hire us to come to your land, that's okay. We're still going to be putting out all this free content to try to help you out. I want to put a smile on your face and want you to have a great hunt. But from our food plot seed blends to books to web classes to hiring us, we have lots of stuff to offer on whitetailhabitatsolutions.com and Pure Wildlife Blends. Make sure you check it out. The links are in the description.